Welcome to Cutting Edge Web Content Development, the podcast where we delve into the world of CMS systems and their crucial role in website and web content development. In each episode, we'll explore the reasons why founders, CEOs, CTOs, and CMOs of web content development companies need CMS systems to thrive in the digital landscape. Get ready to uncover the secrets behind successful website management, content creation, and seamless user experiences. Here's your host, Jonathan Ames.
Welcome to Cutting Edge Web Content Development, a podcast by ButterCMS. Here we share insights on the intersection of content and web development and how you can align these two often competing forces to improve efficiency and business results. Joining us on this episode is Will Roberts, founder and managing director of WebBox. He's here to talk about the impact of CMS on performance and marketing. Welcome to the show, William.
Thanks, Jonathan. Much appreciated. Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your experience, how you got into marketing, some of the projects you've worked on.
Yeah, of course. So kind of when I started, that was back in 2008, and CMSs were evolving at that point. There weren't a great number on the market. And let's be honest, it was really cumbersome for you to update your website back in those days, right? So back at that point, we were building sites using CMSs like early versions of WordPress or Joomla and other things like that. And boy, I'm glad those kind of versions and days are behind us. But it was a good starting point, right? It was the starting point of putting our clients in the driving seat of their content. So that was kind of a good thing, right? And, fast forward now, we're kind of still using CMSs like WordPress, but also many others in the kind of projects that we get involved in. But I think now the kind of ability for the client to mold their content and to manage it and, is far greater than it ever was. But also I think the expectation levels of our clients are now through the roof, where they want to be able to manage far more things than they, could have even dreamt of kind of 10, 15 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So tell me some of the projects that you worked on since 2008. Were some web projects you've been doing?
Yeah. So, we get involved in quite a nice array of web projects. Generally speaking, they've got a nice bespoke element to them. So even if we were to build upon something like WordPress, that would be very much the foundations. And then we would kind of build bespoke functionality and integrations on top of it. All the way through to, completely bespoke solutions, using nothing off the shelf. But we tend to work with kind of clients within a number of sectors, including sport, health, and leisure, that have got some real kind of challenges aligning their CMS with other systems in the business, right? And what they need to do is kind of improve efficiency in operations. And that's where we come in, where we help bring all of these solutions into one jigsaw almost, and make sure that they're kind of speaking to each other. So a lot of our work is around developing CMSs to work with other CRMs and accounts platforms and other tools within the business to improve efficiency ultimately.
So getting into your topic and strategy here, how should someone, or what factors should someone take into account when choosing a CMS?
So I think, when you're running like performance marketing campaigns and you've, got a website within your business, so often they might be kind of managed by different teams, right? You might have a marketing team and then potentially a web team or a development team. And, what we found in kind of our experience is sometimes there's a bit of a breakdown in communication between those two teams, right? So
that's partly why this podcast exists. So we need Google Translate sometimes to go between marketing speak and developer speak. It's like, what did they say?
You're spot on. So this is what, really kind of why I thought this topic might be interesting, right? Because when you kind of are running performance marketing campaigns, you're probably not thinking that much about the CMS of your website. And then vice versa, when you're coming to build a new site, you're probably not thinking about your performance marketing when making that decision, right? And I feel like really kind of bringing the two together and having that conversation is really important, because if we take a few little things as an example, if you're running a performance marketing campaign and you're driving traffic through to a landing page, it is incredibly important that you can mold and edit that landing page based on the data that you're getting back from the campaign. So, if you're realizing that no one's scrolling down the page, or the copy is not resonating with the audience, or the call to action is not clear, boy, you've got to jump on that and sort that out quickly. And if your CMS doesn't allow you to, make those changes without getting a developer involved, then that's going to be a significant barrier to the, results that you get from that performance marketing campaign, right? So, that's one element. I guess you could also have a look at things like page speed, because if you're using a CMS which is really bloated and it's kind of dragging the site down, it's really slow, that's going to have then a negative impact on your performance marketing campaigns, right? So all these things, often are looked at in silo, marketing, well, that's separate to kind of how my website's developed and maintained. But I would love us to kind of join those two together and to really kind of understand that actually one plays into another in far more instances than maybe on face value.
Yeah, quick definition, Will, could you give that for performance marketing for those who are not marketers who are listening in?
Yeah, so performance marketing, this is a term where, some people use it, and I appreciate, I guess this world of performance marketing is called lots of different things, right? So for us, performance marketing is any sort of advertising campaign that is through a paid channel. So these are things like Google ads or Meta ads, programmatic, and so on. Any channel that you're paying for your advert to be on, we then kind of put under that umbrella of performance marketing.
Yeah. And as you brought up there, the reason why it's performance, because you only do it if it performs well. And so the thesis here is that your CMS has an effect on the performance of your campaigns, what you choose there. So yeah, love to hear you go into that. So what are some strategies that you can use to ensure that you're going to have good performance, especially related to the CMS you choose?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is just looking really big picture, right? Obviously, as a business owner, I kind of quite enjoy numbers, right? So I think you've got to know your numbers if you're going to get into this game of, redeveloping your website and running a performance marketing campaign. You've got to understand what is important to your business, right? So, what are your margins? What return on ad spend should you expect? What is a good cost per acquisition? All these kind of things, you need to know through and through. Because if you don't know your numbers, then this is not going to go well. Okay. So first of all, know your business, know your numbers really well, so that you can then work with, an agency or a partner or CMS provider to actually make sure that all these things are stacking up in the right way. I think the other strategy to ensure that you're kind of, measurable when it comes to this performance marketing is tracking, because you can't measure anything without the right tracking in place. Yeah. So often we come across campaigns that have been left with very watered down conversion tracking, should we call it? That's the polite way of putting it. And really what that means is you're tracking things which actually have no real benefit to that business. So, for example, if you were a chain of gyms and someone lands on your website and you're tracking the fact that they've clicked join now, that's not a conversion, right? Because they haven't actually joined. Mm-hmm. What is a conversion is that once they've signed a direct debit and become a member of that gym, then at that point, that's a conversion. But we see all the time where people are tracking right at the top of that funnel of people just clicking, I want to become a member. So you've got to get your tracking in place. And again, how this kind of coincides with the whole world of performance marketing and CMS is because you've got to choose a CMS that allows you to put this tracking in place and to do that easily. So, if it's going to require huge amounts of development time to put this kind of tracking in place, then again, you might have selected the wrong CMS. So you've got to make sure that you're working with a CMS that makes these kind of day-to-day things really simple and then aids, obviously, the performance of your campaign. I guess the other thing to kind of, ensure measurable performance is knowing your audience and knowing what channels they hang out on. So, if you're going after business people, business owners in a particular sector, then understand that you're probably going to find them on LinkedIn rather than Snapchat. Yeah. And these are some real basics, but when it comes to performance marketing, really you've got to start there, knowing your numbers, getting your tracking right, knowing what channels you need to play on before you kind of go down the rabbit hole any further. And the CMS of your site has an impact on that, because some of those things will become, more easy or kind of more difficult depending on the CMS that your website's built on.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned a couple of things there. One, the idea that you could put in place certain things like tracking codes without needing developer help. That's actually something most developers are very happy to not have to put in place tracking codes and such things. They'd much rather be working on more in-depth work than just swapping in a tracking code. So yeah, simple things like that. But if you're running a lot of campaigns, that could be a fair amount of work because you're swapping things out, you're making new pages. Performance marketing, I think what a lot of people don't realize is that it runs really fast. For many companies, you can know within a few days whether your campaign's running well or not. If it's not running, you don't want to just leave it running. You want to quickly make changes there so that you're not losing money off of that. So yeah, really good points. So what are some features you'd say that are available out there from different platforms? And when it comes to creating this good user experience, so you've got the tracking codes in place, your developers don't have to help you make the pages. Now it's like the user experience on page. What are some of those features that really help?
So, let's start with kind of understanding there's a heck of a lot of CMSs on the market, and there's a heck of a lot of different, channels that you could run performance marketing campaigns on. So, what we're going to kind of talk about now is kind of a bit broader than maybe just one specific solution. But, I think what is absolutely critical when you're looking at your CMS is that you've got the ability to kind of manage your page content far above just changing the text and imagery. So if you kind of, if I cast my minds back to 2008 when I first started and I'm kind of editing some content on a website, pretty much all you could do at that point was just change some text, change the image, and that was pretty much it, right? And we thought that was groundbreaking at the time, but I think, you cast your minds forward to now, you need the ability really to be able to mold the whole page without getting a developer involved. So what does that actually mean? That means understanding that a particular block on the page has now, is causing a blocker maybe to a performance marketing campaign. It's just getting in the way. So you need to be able to remove that block or maybe put it further down the page and then bring above the fold blocks of content that are more important. And if that can be done through your CMS without getting a developer involved, then you'll be able to kind of learn from the data of these campaigns, make changes to your site and see results far quicker than potentially what your competition can do, where they've got to wait, weeks for a developer to turn things around and, the whole process then just starts to slow down. So I think, the whole landing page, I think is a key element. The other kind of feature, I think, which is really neat in some CMSs, but also some third parties, which can then plug into CMSs, is having a personalized experience. So let me give like a really basic example, right? So let's say you see an advert on Google and then you click on it and you go through to that person's website. If that business has got offices all over the world, then when you're trying to contact them, you'd probably prefer to see contact information that's more relevant to where you're based, right? So, if you're in the US, you want to see kind of US contact information. If you're in the UK, you want to see UK information and so on. And having the ability to tailor the website's content based on things like where the user is actually located will have a huge impact on the performance of your performance marketing campaigns. Now, that's a really elementary example. If you take this up a few notches, you can start thinking about how do people use my website and then tailor content based on that. So let me give you another example, which is more advanced. What Apple will do on the Apple website is they will start to reduce the level of animation that they show on their landing pages if they detect that you're browsing around their website really quickly. Because if you're browsing around the site really quickly, you know what you're looking for, and therefore you can do away with some of the fancy animation and the storytelling. Whereas if you're not sure what you're looking for, they want to give you that experience of actually being told the story about how the product's been made and, how it's world leading and so on. So these are some of the ways that you can start to bring a personalized user experience through to your site, whether that's through a CMS or a third party, which ultimately will give you better results for your performance marketing campaign. Now, if you can get to that level, you're probably working with an incredible CMS and you've probably got a really good performance marketing campaign, and the two go very much hand in hand.
Yeah. So you first talked about kind of localization there. So giving cues that are local to wherever the person is logging in from. Just simple things, even, using the same language, there's slight differences between the UK and the United States. Even in regions within a country, you could have enough of a difference there that it might affect your conversion rates if you're able to personalize those to that particular region. So as far as, localization goes, is there really a difference, between one CMS and another as to how easy it is to do that kind of localization?
Yeah, so I guess it depends how it's implemented, right? So I don't want to kind of get into the real technicality and then bore loads of your listeners, but there are ways to do this kind of on-site where you might kind of place cookies in play, or you might detect location through other means like IP address and so on. And you can do that on-site within your CMS already, but potentially based on the CMS you're using, that might be more or less difficult than it needs to be. Okay. On the flip side of that, you can integrate third parties, and there are platforms. I don't mind saying ones, such as Personalize, and Personalize can plug into lots of different CMSs, and it can start to provide you with a personalized content service for your website that also has AI built into it, so it learns from how your users are using the site. And again, based on the CMS you use, it might become more or less difficult to actually integrate that service than it needs to be. So, sometimes when it comes to CMSs, we look at a CMS and go, oh, well, we've heard of that one, so we feel comfortable with it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best one for that particular project. And we've just got to be careful about that.
Yeah. No, we bring up personalization there too. And, aside from localization, if there are ways to personalize to that particular performance marketing campaign, I know a big one that's been around for a little bit, but this idea of pulling in the search term from that campaign and actually maybe putting that into a headline dynamically, is that something that's available across all CMSs, or is that something that's easier in some than others?
Definitely easier in some than others. I think we've got to be real about that, right? Some CMSs make this level of customization just really difficult, and it doesn't need to be, right? But you can get to a point where you tailor the whole journey right from the starting point. So someone could be on a Google page and they could search something in. Your ad copy could include what they've just searched. So it's really relevant to what they've searched. Once they've clicked on the ad, again, then the headline of that page could be what they've searched if it's relevant. So again, they feel like it's really tailored to what they were looking for from that original search. And then, of course, you can start to tailor content further based on what we know about that user. So, as they start to browse around your website, they might be reading one type of topic more than another, or they might be interested in one service over another. And then you can start to serve up more of that kind of content based on, what they're doing around your site. And this really is about understanding that we're all different. We've all got different kind of requirements. We've all got different technical abilities. We're all in a different stage of the buying journey, whether that's right at the top of the funnel or right at the bottom. And actually, if your website can adjust the experience to really tailor it to that particular user while still doing that in volume, then you're going to see far better results from just your website performance and also any campaign that you're running than if you've just got generic copy, which is shown to everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. I know one of the things that I've seen over the course of my career is one of the most effective performance marketing campaigns is retargeting. So you know who this person is. Now you're trying to get them back to your site for whatever reason. So because you know who they are, there's the opportunity for personalization there on a whole nother level. So you could show content, like you're saying, either based on their previous browsing history, or perhaps, they're a customer and you're coming back, you're trying to pitch some other new product or cross-sell to them. So all those opportunities are there. I think sometimes for marketers, the challenge that they come across is they're like, well, how do I know what I should personalize on? What's going to really, because there's all these possibilities, but where do you find that out? Do you get that question a bit as an agency owner? I'm sure.
Yeah. I think in the world of marketing these days, you could always ask yourself, where do you start? Because there are so many options available to you, right? And in one way, that's good. But obviously, on the other hand, it just causes confusion sometimes. So, we always kind of talk to our clients about starting in the places that are going to give that kind of result, that more immediate result, So that isn't necessarily running a performance marketing campaign necessarily, or it's not necessarily running Google Ads, because this is different, right, on a per business basis. So we need to look at kind of each individual business, its target audience and its offering and competitors and so on, and then try and put together a strategy which is relevant for that business. But when we put forward that strategy, it's got to be kind of like, what does phase one look like? So we might have a starting point, and then it might be kind of like in a few months' time, as you mentioned, Jonathan, we kind of include remarketing maybe at that point. Once we've built up some data, we've got more people coming through the site, let's pull in remarketing now into the mix. And then potentially again, a few months later, let's add another channel. And I think when you do it that way, you're kind of making sure that you've tested and proven a concept before you kind of introduce something else. Because if you kind of start with everything, you're going to get overwhelmed, right? There's just too much. And the same goes, with a website project. If you're building a site, on a CMS, let's be honest, sometimes if you're looking at a big, heavy, bespoke project, then actually it might sometimes be easier to break this into phases. And again, when selecting a CMS in that process, knowing that you're working with a CMS that can actually scale so that, you can undertake phase one and that it's capable of doing everything that you need to complete in phase one, but you've also got the big picture in mind, right? And you go, right, well, I know what's happening or required for phase 2, 3, 4, and so on. Can my CMS handle that? Because if it can't, going back to the marketing director or sales director to say, look, I'm really sorry, but we've got to re-platform because we didn't realize that actually we selected the wrong CMS at phase one. That's not going to be an easy conversation, is it?
That's scary. A lot of people, I'll tell you, obviously I work for a CMS. So we talk to a lot of customers who are in this process of kind of figuring out which CMS to choose. And you know what the biggest problem is the fear that people have that, what if I choose the wrong CMS? Because it affects so many other things and you don't want to re-platform every year, believe me. No. So that's the biggest challenge I think a lot of our listeners are going to face is they're thinking, all right, well, I love this. We want to use the right CMS for our performance marketing. I just don't want to make the wrong choice. And I think one of the things people turn to when they're trying to make that decision and overcome that fear is they say, all right, I have this tech stack of things. Which CMS is going to integrate best into my existing tech stack or maybe the planned tech stack, if it's a greenfield project? So maybe you have some tips about how can you ensure that the CMS you pick is going to have a smooth integration with these various other tools in your stack?
So I'll be honest, I love this topic because this is a conversation that I have with our clients on a regular basis. Because, so often we come across situations where people go, I want to use this particular CMS. And you say, right, okay, well, that's fine, but why? And they're like, oh, well, I know another business uses it, or I've heard of it before. But actually, those aren't reasons for you to apply the decision-making process to your business, right? You need to go through a logical and sensible decision-making process for your business. And you need to actually look at pros and cons of maybe a number of different CMSs to determine what is right for your business. Because when you think about a kind of CMS platform, do you think they set out at day one wanting to be all things to all men? Probably not. They probably have a target audience in mind or a particular business use case. And that's what, they're going to really target and focus on. If you look at popular CMSs like, WordPress was started as a blogging platform, back in the day. And the crux of it under the hood is still that to this very day. Well, that doesn't work for all businesses, right? The actual kind of mechanics of holding big data doesn't work well in WordPress at all. So if you're a business that is housing thousands and thousands or hundreds of thousands of records, that's not going to be a good CMS choice for you. So this is, where you've really got to start thinking about kind of what does it mean for my business to choose the right CMS? And we often actually kind of take our clients through a process of considering pros and cons of different CMSs and collaboratively making that decision. I just want to kind of, make the point that I think it's really dangerous when the agency completely steers that conversation and says, look, I really think you should use this particular CMS. And actually, if you dig into that kind of decision, the reason is probably because they find it, simple to use and they've got pre-made templates and it's going to increase their efficiency and profitability on the project and so on. They're not necessarily thinking about what's best for that business. And I think we've got to just be careful about that. And I think one thing we're trying to do here at WebBox is try and be slightly more of an independent voice where, of course, we've got our preferences. Of course, we've got, pre-made modules and so on. But actually, morally, we want to make sure the CMS is fit for purpose for that particular project. And that's of greater importance to us than, pushing a CMS, which is not going to be relevant for that business and not allow them to scale in years to come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good points. I know one of the clients that came to us was evaluating Butter. One of the things that they wanted as part of their stack to integrate with the CMS was Salesforce. So I said, well, does your product integrate with Salesforce? And as we dug into kind of what it is that they wanted to integrate with that, we found out that, well, really they're just wanting to pass the form data from the CMS to Salesforce. Well, pretty much any CMS can do that. That's pretty easy to do. So also, just understanding what it is you want, how you want to integrate it. I mean, do you want them to talk back and forth? Do you just need to pass data from one to the other? So as a marketer, I mean, I don't have some of the in-depth technical knowledge that some of my friends in the development world would have about integrations. But I have learned over time that when someone says, we got an integration, does not always mean the same thing. Sometimes the integration could be very good. Sometimes it could be very sketchy, very basic. So really, you need someone who has a little bit of experience with these integrations and can tell you, not only does it integrate, but it can do the integration can do the things you want it to do. How do you help your clients to figure out, what they need to integrate and how deep that needs to be?
Yeah, like we're actually, in the process of doing this with one of our clients at the moment, because I think sometimes when you try and do that in your own business, it's actually quite challenging because you're maybe not 100% sure about all of your processes and operations and systems because you're actually just so close to it, right? So, we're kind of that external pair of eyes to understand what's in place at the minute, what kind of CRM do they use? What do they use for accounts and other, platforms they've got? And then we kind of start to dig a little bit deeper into operations, so, when an order comes in, what do you do? What do you do with that? And at the moment, to be honest, it's quite a manual process. Someone prints this and then they pass it to distribution and then, all these kind of things, right? And you dig into it and you start to build a picture as to what is at the moment quite a cumbersome and disjointed process. And you go, right, well, if we're going to kind of then rebuild the site, let's look at a CMS that can actually integrate maybe with some of these platforms. And what, as you rightly say, what does that integration look like? Because there's multiple ways to achieve that. But also then, how can we assist with your workflows? Because at the moment, if, an order comes in and there's like lots of manual parts to that, all you're doing, right, is slowing down the process of getting that order shipped. And I use it as an example just because it's an e-commerce client that we're dealing with. So, they're kind of thinking, right, this has to be done manually, and then we've got to check this with the warehouse and so on. And what we're trying to do is actually put systems and processes in place to automate that. And again, some CMSs will make that super easy. Others will simply just not have the functionality. And that's why it's really important that we kind of take that step back and to really kind of consider the pros and cons of CMSs and what it means for the business to implement what will become a more automated process, because that will be a big shift for them in their business as well.
Yes. Yeah, that I can't emphasize enough your point there about operational efficiency. It is the feature that should be number one considered, and it's usually the one that's never on the criteria sheet of what we want out of a piece of a tech stack is, how quick can it make us in being able to implement these things? But many times you will get a wonderful product that's very, very feature rich, but simply by the nature of it having so many features, it often slows down the process. And unless you have like a huge staff that can specialize in each of these kind of feature sets, often those features get unused. They simply slow down the process, and you have, in the end, a very beautiful but very slow process, whether it's shipping out e-commerce or whether it's getting a lead through the cycle or whether it's making a change in your content. And that operational efficiency, it's every day your team will experience that. Whereas most features, I'd say 80% of the features are used from time to time. The other 20% are like an everyday thing, and those better be super fast.
Yeah.
So as far as, all right, we've talked a lot about integrations here. When people are coming down to the choice of picking a CMS, especially if they want to do performance marketing, what are some common mistakes that happen, and how can people avoid those?
Yeah. So I think, there's lots of mistakes, people make, let's be honest. And part of that is a learning journey, right? We've all got to understand that, mistakes are going to be made when you're running a performance marketing campaign, but you want to learn from those mistakes quickly, right? So, and people might think, well, I'm being a bit too honest there, but we've got to be real about the fact that there's not a magic formula to running a performance marketing campaign and it absolutely being perfect at day one, right? That almost doesn't exist, right? So we've got to be real about the fact that there's going to be some bumps in the road, but it's what you learn from those and how quickly you can adapt, which will make you kind of win over your competitor. So I think really kind of it's important, coming back to how these two topics relate, it's important that the mistake isn't the CMS that you've selected. So, when you're running your performance marketing campaign, you will be regularly checking data and optimizing that campaign. And if you are being held back by the CMS that you've selected, because you can't make particular changes based on what the data is saying, that's going to be a huge mistake, because that's not just costly. That's like monumental, like go back to the drawing board kind of level. So that is a huge mistake, which unfortunately we have seen on a number of occasions where the wrong solution is in place. And it is a huge barrier to driving the results for a performance marketing campaign that we want to do. I think the other mistake, and I touched on this briefly earlier, is, when the agency has got a little bit too much say in the CMS that you kind of make use of, right? And, I know, Butter is a great CMS, and there's lots of CMSs available on the market. And I think, you will have to make an informed decision for your particular business as to which CMS is right for you. Because ultimately, you've got to think about how the website's going to be updated, who's doing that, what integrations do we need, so on and so forth, not just in the immediate, but what might come in, years to come. And if you're solely led by your agency saying, we think you should go with this CMS, and they don't put any others on the table, it's highly likely because they've obviously got, a pre-made solution, which is great for their efficiency and profitability. But in some instances, it's going to be a really bad decision for your business. So I think, you need to kind of have a bit of a sense check at that point and say, look, this could be a mistake. And I'm not saying it always is a mistake, but it could be a big costly mistake if you just go with that recommendation. And then just a final thing I think I would touch on is look, we're all thinking about the here and now. So we're kind of currently building this website. Everyone probably in the marketing team is really excited because the budget's been kind of signed off, and the project they've been longing to go ahead with for years is finally going ahead. But we need to also think about the future, right? What might the business need in 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 3 years? Because actually the choice of CMS needs to be scalable. It needs to be one where, in a year's time, you're not going to have to go back to the drawing board and rebuild from the ground up. Now, I'm not saying it lasts forever, but it needs to have headroom and it needs to be scalable so that you've got a solution which is going to be there for the medium term. I think they're kind of three things which kind of are common mistakes we come across, and probably shared by some of your listeners as well.
Yeah. No, the average time that a customer stays with our CMS is 4 years. So, this is something, when you choose a CMS, it's going to be something that may even outlive, you staying at that particular position. So make a good choice there and evaluate multiple options is a good one, because unfortunately, there are a lot of good agencies out there that build their whole business on a single solution. And while that's good, if you fit, what that's best for, if it's not, then you may be kind of pushed into a direction that's, like you said, either not going to scale or not going to give you the things you really need. So good points there. Speaking one other thing about mistakes, every performance campaign I've ever run has always required changes, because there's things that after you run it, you're like, that was a mistake. We're going to try it this way now.
Yeah.
A/B testing. Can you talk a little bit about, CMSs and A/B testing and performance campaigns especially?
Yeah, of course. So, the ability to do an A/B split test is really important. And again, the kind of choice of CMS will allow you to do that in hopefully in an easy way if you've got a good CMS, right? So, you're sending traffic through to one of two pages at this point where you're kind of testing whether, version A of that page or version B of that page works. So I just want to explain that for the listeners, right? So if you're not sure of A/B split testing, that's kind of what it is. And what you're trying to kind of ascertain from that is which layout of that page works best. So it's really important that then once you've done that test and you go, right, okay, version A is the kind of overall champion in the kind of test, then you can kind of go back to drawing board and go, right, let's now create two versions of that and kind of drill into it further. And you might make different changes at that point based on the data that you're getting back. But all of this comes back to the point that this is only an option to you if you've got a CMS that allows you to, manage your content well, right? Because if you're using a CMS that's, difficult to use and kind of has got really fixed layouts and you've got no real control over things apart from just the text and the imagery on the page, then actually running these kind of tests is going to be almost impossible, but just difficult, right? You need the ability to kind of be doing this in quite a quick way. So you might gather data for a period of time, make changes quickly, and then go again. And if your CMS is kind of the stumbling block and kind of holding you back, then again, the results of your performance marketing campaign are going to be impacted. So this is where it's really important that, both teams within businesses are talking and understanding what each other requires for their roles.
Yeah. That's Butter is a headless CMS. So we always have developers involved as well as marketers in that. And really the best results that we've seen with clients is when you have right at the beginning point, both the marketers and the developers side by side, kind of talking about what's going to make that CMS successful for them. For the developers, they're caring about, what framework we're going to be able to build this in, how quickly we're going to be able to get it up to speed, how much work it is to maintain the CMS. Whereas, marketers are thinking about things like, is it easy to get the design that I want, to quickly change things? Do I have to bring developers in on everything, or can I do a lot of this on my own? So all very important points.
Yeah.
Well, I always ask this question of every guest, Will, because I think it's important, for us to learn from one another's experiences in life. If you could go back in a time machine, talk to yourself at the beginning of your career, what one piece of advice would you give yourself starting out that you didn't know then, but you know now?
Oh, good question. I think there's so many kind of, like over 15 years, there's so many lessons and kind of things that I wish I knew at day one, right? If I were to pick one, it would probably be to have become a specialist sooner in my career. So, now when we're kind of talking, there are very specific topics that I have, become knowledgeable about and specialize in. And, that represents our client base and what we offer here at WebBox, right? But actually 15 years ago, it was more a case of, offering more services to a broader audience. And I think that kind of watered down and diluted really the kind of understanding of each of those areas. And that's just being real, right? It's just the way it was. And I think back in those days, agencies were a little bit kind of broader than they are now. So it was a case of, let's offer all of these services to anyone that's, willing to take them on. But really kind of over the years, we've really found our kind of niche within, kind of web development that obviously involves CMSs and performance marketing. And they're topics that, we know through and through and have built up that experience and expertise in. But if only I'd known that 15 years ago.
Well, tell us a little bit about WebBox. I mean, what's the best kind of client for you where you can really perform the best? And what are the things that you do in performance marketing and maybe set you apart from other performance marketing agencies?
Yeah. Okay. So, WebBox are a digital agency, which I founded back in 2008. And really, what we do is we work with our clients to generate leads, memberships, and inquiries through bespoke web development and performance marketing. So we've got a really kind of clear proposition, which is kind of helping those within the sport, health, and leisure sectors to make themselves more digitally fit. So, sport, health, and leisure have lots of similarities, and they share a lot of common challenges. And, over the years, we've kind of intentionally built up a client base that kind of span those three sectors, because we understand the challenges that face those businesses. And we've got kind of either experience or insights or solutions which kind of perfectly marry up to what they're trying to achieve. So, whether that is, generating more members for a gym, whether that's kind of helping a health organization get into the worlds of e-commerce, kind of lots of things in between that, then actually that's really kind of how we work with our clients. And I think one of the things that sets us apart is not only that clear kind of segment of the segment of the market that we're going after, but also I think the way that we work with our clients, right? So one of our values here at WebBox is just to be brutally transparent. And hopefully that's kind of come across today, right? I've talked about the fact that there might be some mistakes. I've talked about the fact that, not every CMS is right for every business, and I think really we're quite a real team. We kind of say it as it is because we recognize that actually if we, don't communicate some of these things to our clients and we kind of hold them back, then actually it's only going to be doing them a disservice. So yeah, we're kind of brutally transparent in making sure that our clients know, the performance of their campaigns. They've got access to everything. We share timesheets. We're always trying to kind of go over and above in being transparent about our service, which, is one of the ways in which we differentiate ourselves in the market.
Excellent. How could people find you online, Will? Or we'll find WebBox online?
Yeah, that's it. Hopefully it's simple. So find us at webbox.digital. Look us up, have a look at our site. And if you've got questions, feel free to reach out there or via LinkedIn.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Will. Really appreciate your insights on performance marketing and CMS and enjoyed the conversation.
Great. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, Jonathan.
Take care.
Cutting Edge Web Content Development is brought to you by ButterCMS. To find out how you can build better with Butter, stop wasting dev time, and free your marketers from your legacy CMS, visit buttercms.com. Also, make sure to search for Cutting Edge Web Content Development in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at ButterCMS, thank you for listening.